Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching 6th part of What If Naruto Was Forgotten Son of Minato. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Unknown location. Purple energy swirled around a cavern, creating an energy storm. The power was uncontrollable, only contained by a large gate with a ceiling tag. The energies were gradually forming the rough shape of a man. The figure remained indistinct and blurred, but it seemed to open its eyes slightly, revealing purple slit pupils, and spoke in an echoing tone, "Soon." From outside the seal, Shio Uzumaki smiled as she approached Konoha's majestic gates for the first time in 3 years. Her armored gown swayed in the breeze as she walked alongside her godfather, Jiraiya. She'd been gone for 3 years on a training trip. They'd traveled the 5 countries, training and learning new skills from Jiraiya's spy network. She had also trained with the Toads for some time, eventually mastering Senjutsu with the assistance of shadow clones. She had also decided to change her outfit after discovering this battle outfit in an earthen shinobi store. She hoped her new look was well received in Konoha. She was confident that her improved abilities would impress them. Konoha Medical Center. So you weren't attempting to flee the hospital before being released? As a large spider hung from the ceiling, the Jonin tied to the bed in spider silk shook his head in terror. "Good," the doctor said, making another tick mark on his clipboard, "because if you tried for the 5th time this week, especially after your last accident on the previous mission, I would be very displeased. I would have to take." He looked up at the cocooned Jonin and large spider on the ceiling. "Dramatic action to keep you contained." Okay. I swear I won't try to escape anymore," said the Jonin. "If I see you try to escape one more time, I'm poisoning your food," the doctor said as he dispelled the spider and bindings. The Jonin quickly nodded, and the doctor sighed and left the patient's room. He entered Tsunade's office after walking down the hall. Tsunade looked up. "Menma, I see you're done threatening another patient." "Yes, Azoi-san can't seem to stay in his bed, so I used some more permanent persuasion tactics," Menma nodded. "Are you sure that's how a Jonin should act?" Tsunade smirked. Menma sighed. Tsunade had always teased him about being promoted to Jonin, and he had decided to continue working in the hospital with her. He had been promoted to Jonin 1 year after Shio had left for her training trip, and he had learned some advanced medical techniques from Tsunade. From performing heart surgery to resetting bones, he had learned it all. After 2 years of studying medical ninjutsu, he trained in the Forbidden. Over the course of 3 years, he reconnected with his former parents, who were now close friends and met for dinner every Sunday. He adjusted his lab coat and tan turtleneck shirt before returning his attention to Tsunade. "By the way, are they coming back today?" Tsunade looked up from her papers. "Yes, the brat and the pervert are returning. You should meet them at the entrance." Menma nodded and walked out of the hospital, waving to a few acquaintances along the way. He had become quite well known in the village and had even earned himself a spot in the bingo book as an A-ranked nin. Entry 283 in the bingo book. Menma Gorgon's name. The Plague Bringer's alias. Rank A. Threat level. Exercise extreme caution and never engage without backup. Master Medic Nin. Master Archer. Master Chakra Manipulation. Spider Contract. Known skill: highly advanced poison manipulation. He was quite proud of his achievements, not to mention his secret ability, which only Tsunade and Arachne had seen. He had also given himself a last name, which Arachne had suggested because one of her best friends had that last name. It felt good to have a last name again, and he'd have a clan name if he ever decided to start a family. He kept walking to the gate, preparing for the reunion with his sister, whom he hadn't seen in 3 years. The Konoha Gates. Shio jumped onto a pole near Konoha's gates and spread her arms wide, smiling at the sensation of wind passing around her as she observed the city. "Shio, go and reacquaint yourself with the city," Jiraiya said from below. "I'll go tell your father." Shio nodded and was about to go explore when she heard, "Yo, Shio. You've grown in stature. Kakashi-sensei," she exclaimed joyfully. "It's been a long time, Shio," the Cyclops John and I said, crouching on a rooftop. "It has," Shio exclaimed with her trademark wide grin. "Kakashi, I've grown a lot stronger. I think I'm stronger than you now." "I'm sure you have a few years before you're at my level, Shio," Kakashi laughed. "I have to meet with Hokage-sama for a meeting. Go find some of your friends to talk with," Kakashi said before she could continue. Shio nodded, and Kakashi vanished in a puff of smoke. She jumped down from the pole and began exploring Konoha's busy streets. Shio wandered around until she came across a familiar face. Her brother had changed a lot since she left Konoha. His hair was still in that spiky style he had 3 years ago, but his outfit had completely changed. He now wore a skin-tight black turtleneck, dark red shinobi pants with many pockets, and a white lab coat over the attire. From Menma's perspective, Menma turned around when he heard his name and saw his sister for the first time in 3 years. She had changed a lot in 3 years, wearing a red battle dress with matching armored leggings instead of her eyesore orange attire. Menma guessed that the armor was inscribed with anti-gravity seals to prevent the armor from hindering her combat. "Hello, Shio, it's been 3 years, he said with a smile. "It feels so much longer, though." Shio grinned. "We have a lot of catching up to do." "Yes, but later," Menma said. "We just received a summons from Hokage-sama." Shio was perplexed. "How do you know?" "You are correct. You both are to come to the Hokage's office immediately," said an Anbu. They all flickered away as both nodded. Office of the Hokage. Minato sat in his chair, contemplating the current situation. The Akatsuki had shown signs of movement in recent months, but what truly concerned him was the situation with the Kyuubi. He had received an urgent missive from Jiraiya halfway through their training trip explaining that the Kyuubi's consciousness was not in the seal. The chakra was there, but the beast's soul was not. He didn't know if being separated from his yin half killed the Kyuubi or if it escaped in some way, but it made controlling the Kyuubi's chakra both harder and easier. She no longer had to fight the Kyuubi's consciousness for control of the chakra, but she couldn't make a deal to use small amounts of the energy without the Kyuubi. Shio was becoming a wonderful kunoichi even without the Kyuubi's chakra. Her wind manipulation and sword skill were unparalleled in the village and had surpassed many foreign ninjas. He needed to see their ability firsthand, so he had prepared this demonstration. When he felt the familiar incoming chakra signatures, the fourth Hokage looked up and began speaking to the now-present duo, "Shio, Menma, it is good to see you both. I summoned you both here to demonstrate your skills against an opponent of my choosing in a mock battle." Menma raised an eyebrow. "Who will we be fighting against, Hokage-sama?" "Me," Minato smiled. Shio's eyes widened, and Menma frowned deeply. "Hokage-sama, we have no chance against you. Will this be a truly fair fight?" "I won't be going at full strength, and you won't need to injure me," Minato said, nodding. "Meet me at Training Ground 7, where your senseis and a few other observers will be." The Chunin and Jonin nodded, and they vanished in a shunshin. Training Area 7. Menma and Shio stood across from Minato, the wind blowing across the field as Jiraiya, Tsunade, Anko, Kakashi, and the rest of Teams 7 and 9 arrived. Lee still wore a dark green jumpsuit, but he now wore a lime green scarf that nearly covered his mouth. Yakumo had decided to slightly mimic her teacher's style and now wore a bandana trench coat combo. Anko had not changed her style, but she had added 2 bracers to her arm with large blades attached, perfect for her snake style of combat. Kiba had grown up a lot since his days as a genin, and he now wore a more mature outfit than his previous bulky coat, a gray track jacket with matching pants, and a face mask similar to Kakashi's. By his side was Akamaru, who had grown significantly in size. "You both already know the rules," Minato said as he took out 2 bells and showed them to both genin. "I have 2 bells, and you must have one by sunrise." Menma and Shio nodded and took their positions. After a short while, Minato exclaimed, "Begin." Shio burst into action, summoning her Nodochi and appearing behind Minato, swinging her sword to bisect him. When the blade was inches away from Minato, he vanished in a yellow flash and reappeared on a tree. "Did I forget to mention that I pre-prepared this field before the test? I have placed Hirishin seals in 5 locations throughout the forest. You have to beat me before I teleport to the next mark," he said. He would have continued, but he had to dodge Menma, who appeared behind him with a palm thrust that completely obliterated it. As Minato jumped away from Shio's katana's palm thrust, he had to avoid a large gust of cutting wind by throwing a Hirishin kunai into the air, effectively avoiding both attacks. Menma made some hand gestures and spat poison in small, fast balls, poison scatter shot. Minato moved through the bullets, deflecting a katana thrust from Shio with his kunai. He spun in the air and kicked his daughter away just in time to intercept a palm thrust with his arm. The large blast released from the palm pushed the Hokage back a little. What insane chakra control, Minato thought as he observed the damage from the palm thrust. Instead of using his super strength for brute force, Tsunade fires the chakra out like a cannon, destroying anything he presses his hand against. He spun around and slashed deep into Menma's arm before he could dodge, spilling blood on the ground. He was perplexed when the blood turned black instead of the usual red liquid. Menma smirked at Minato as he looked at the blood on the ground. "Hey Hokage-sama, did you know my blood is black?" Minato appeared perplexed, but his eyes widened as spikes of blood erupted from the liquid on the ground, which would have impaled Minato if he hadn't been replaced by a clone. Menma smirked and manipulated the blood on the ground to coat his hands in the protective layer. He remembered discovering this ability of his. Flashback. Menma was sorting through his medical supplies when he cut himself on a sharp scalpel and cursed. He sighed and wiped his hand on a napkin, which he placed beside him. Tsunade entered the room, puzzled, and stared at the dark liquid. "Menma, why is your blood black?" "I ingested too much poison while training to become immune to it, and my blood turned black as a result," Menma explained. Anko-sensei said this is a common situation among poison specialists. "No, this isn't a case of blood poisoning," Tsunade said, shaking her head. "If you had the disease, it would make your blood a darker color, but not this dark. Your blood is completely black, which should be impossible because of the white cells in your blood." "Then what do I have?" Menma blinked. "I'm not sure, I haven't seen this before," Tsunade said, puzzled. Menma frowned and examined the small blood drop on his finger. He looked at it for a while before deciding to channel chakra into it. Nobody in the room expected the drop to come to a sharp point in front of him. They both stared at the blood spike as it slowly receded as Menma removed the chakra within it. Tsunade awoke from her trance and stated, "We have a lot of training to cover." Menma just nodded, too stunned to speak. Flashback concludes. They had thoroughly tested his blood and discovered that a new bloodline was emerging. The combination of ingesting too many poisons and his bond with the spiders appears to have altered his DNA more than expected. He had no DNA from his parents and was almost a completely different being. His body could hold a lot more blood, which he could control with his chakra. He hypothesized that this was similar to how other clans obtained their bloodlines, by repeatedly performing an exercise that altered their DNA. Back to the battle, Menma was constantly using his bloody needles to keep Minato on guard as he attacked with palm thrusts. Despite his disadvantages, Minato was able to successfully dodge all of the attacks, including some from Shio. As Shio approached with her sword glowing brightly, Menma had to dodge out of the way of a Hirishin Rasengan combo and jump away. Shio reappeared 3 times around Minato, calling out, "Flying Swallow." Minato was forced to Hirishin away because the 3 simultaneous attacks would have severely injured him. On their training trip, she had been bugged by a swallow and had learned this move. She had spent the entire day trying to kill it with her sword until she mastered the flying swallow technique. Don't be too harsh. The damn bird stole her last bite of ramen. The fight lasted hours, with Minato evading and dodging all of their attacks with his Hirishin Kunai. Menma and Shio panted in the shade of a tree near dawn, exhausted from their long battle. Both were using sensory techniques to keep track of Minato, who was only a half-mile away from them. Hog. We need to find his weakness. He is nearly invincible with his Hirishin because there is nothing we can do to cage him in. Shio took a long drink of water and spoke, "Hog. We need to find his weakness. He is nearly invincible with his Hirishin because there is nothing we can do to cage him in. During my SEAL training I could not find a good counter for the Hirishin besides what Orochimaru did at the Chun." Menma nodded and then thought, "Hey. You've known him for 13 years, surely you know something he's weak against." Shio sighed, aside from his slight allergy to peanuts, I can't think of." She trailed off, a truly evil prankster smile on her face. Menma wiped his brow and asked warily, "What?" Shio's grin widened as she asked, "Menma-chan, how good at the henge are you?" Menma frowned more when she called him brother, then sweat dropped more when she asked, "Good enough to fool anyone without chakra sensing, I suppose." "Here's the plan," Shio chuckled. When Menma began to explain the plan, she wished she could stop grinning. Wildlife removal. Minato waited for an ambush in the middle of the clearing. He was extremely proud of his 2 children, even though Menma was technically no longer his child. He read the medical report, which stated that his parents' DNA had been destroyed by his new bloodline limit. He had no idea the black blood could be controlled. He was told that it simply allowed him to produce more blood than usual. He couldn't really blame a ninja for keeping secrets. He was still looking for an ambush when he heard his wife yell, "Minato Namikaze." When he saw his wife approaching him with her hair in its signature 9-tailed state, he spun around and spluttered, "Ku Kushina. Haha. Why are you here? Why didn't you tell me my daughter had returned to the village? I would have met her at the gates the minute she walked through. And you just decide to wander off without telling me about this training exercise." Kushina scowled. Minato tried to explain, but Kushina snarled, "No excuses, you are going to stop this exercise or you are sleeping on the couch for a month." Kushina smirked and held up the 2 bells before disappearing in a plume of smoke, revealing Menma, "We win, Hokage-sama." Minato blinked briefly before burst out laughing as Shio emerged from hiding, smirking at their victory. The rest of the audience joined in, congratulating the 2 on their victory. Shio smirked at her father, "I knew you were weak against Ka-san, 2-san. You were whipped." Menma remarked, "Your reactions were a bit too real though, you did tell Kushina about this exercise, right?" Minato tried to defend his pride. Minato appeared to freeze briefly before breaking out in a sweat. Shio sighed and said, "I guess it'll be sleeping on the couch for you, Dad." Everyone laughed as Minato appeared to despair at his wife's rage at not knowing her daughter had returned. Later in the day. "You know, Menma, you didn't summon any spiders against Minato. I'm kind of surprised," Shio said as they walked together after the match. "I can't summon any spiders right now because Arachne is preparing the ritual that will allow me to fully utilize the spider senjutsu. All the spiders are participating in this event, and I'm told it's a time of great celebration when a new spider senjutsu wielder is about to be initiated. Shio nodded. Yes, when I mastered senjutsu, the frogs celebrated as well. I didn't use it against Minato because he would have prevented me from meditating in order to gather nature energy. Well, aside from our unconventional victory, Shio-san, I'm glad you're back in the village, Menma said with a smile. Shio smiled with her trademark wide grin and closed eyes. Yep. Menma, I'm glad to see you back. The games had finally begun. Unbeknownst to the two laughing and smiling teenagers, a messenger hawk was already on its way from Suna, carrying a message that would change their lives over the next year. Konoha. The Suna insignia was flown into the message booth near the Hokage's tower by an eagle. When the active ninja on duty saw the color of the scroll, black, which means it's an emergency, his eyes widened. I'll show this to Hokage-sama. He dashed out of the room, sprinting to bring the message to Minato's attention. Minato's office, 1 hour later. This is an S-ranked mission, Minato said seriously to the two teams in front of him. The Kazekage, Gaara no Sabaku, has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki, presumably to remove his Biju. Shio Uzumaki, Mito Gecko, Sakura Haruno, Menma Gorgon, and Kakashi Hatake, you five are assigned this mission, he said solemnly to the 5 shinobi in front of him. Menma took a look around at the assembled ninja. He was familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of the majority of his teammates. Sakura and Mito had experienced power surges in the previous 3 years. Sakura caught his attention. She had surprised everyone by quickly progressing from the weakest rookie to one of the strongest in only 2 years. She had elevated Kurenai Genjutsu to new heights. She had also changed her appearance in recent years. The Chinese bright dresses were replaced by a sort of bondage-style gear that showed off far more than was necessary. However, her lack of armor had not hampered her in the least because most enemies never hit her because of her illusions. She was a true rival to Yakumo Kurama, who had recently retired from missions to work full-time in the T&I department. She'd earned the moniker, the Deceiver. Mito Gecko had recently earned a well-deserved reputation as a swordswoman. She was famous for fighting with a broken nodochi that her father had given her. She developed a new look based on the broken blade. She was also known for separating her chakra into physical and mental energy, only using her physical chakra in battle to provide her with great strength, speed, and mobility. She was given the nickname, Broken Wing, to represent her broken sword style. He knew the team was well-rounded because each member had a specialization. He knew they'd all be tested to their limits against the Akatsuki, so he hoped it'd be enough. Minato looked each member in the eyes before declaring, "All right then, the Kazekage retrieval mission begins now." Each member of the new team yelled, "Hi!" and then vanished to prepare for the mission. The Konoha gates. The 5 members of the newly christened Team Kakashi arrived at the gate and sped off to Wind's Land. Shio spotted a familiar figure after several hours of running. "Hey, is that Temari?" She must be returning from her visit for the Chunin exams that are coming up, Menma observed as she looked down the path they were following. "She can come with us," the report said that her brother is in danger. Temari's worried exclamations notwithstanding, the Team +1 made good progress through the desert. Temari's knowledge of the terrain aided them greatly in their journey. He also learned a new chakra exercise of keeping a chakra platform beneath his feet to avoid being slowed down by the sand. It was very similar to water walking, so he and everyone else did it on the fly. When they arrived in town, they were immediately taken to the hospital. He ignored the obviously senile old lady's loud exclamations in order to check on Kankuro. He unsealed his lab coat and put it on, along with a face mask and plastic gloves. The toxin in his body is iron-based. It is difficult to form an antidote because of how sturdy the poison is. It is basically killing his cells from the inside out, like a disease. He inserted a needle into Konkuro's forearm. The moaning Jonin appeared to enter a death-like state right away. Tamari, who was watching, exclaimed, "What did you do?" "I used venom to put him into a brief coma, which will slow his heartbeat down to a crawl and stop the poison from going through his bloodstream, giving me significantly more time to prepare an antidote." "You?" Menma pointed to a local doctor. The man jumped up and asked the Konoha medic, "Yes?" "Quickly fetch me everything on this list. I can prepare an antidote after forcefully extracting most of the poison," Menma said, handing the man a list of herbs and medicines. The man nodded and made some hand gestures, forming a large ball of water in the air. He pressed his hand against it and drew out a large bubble, saying, "I will warn anyone watching, this will be unpleasant." He used a scalpel to make a small cut on Konkuro and forcefully inserted the water into the sand Jonin. If Konkuro had been conscious, he would have felt excruciating pain as the poison was forced from his system. He turned to the doctors who were watching after nearly a half hour of extracting the poison and said, "He is in stable condition, but I need those herbs to create an antidote to fully remove the poison, and hopefully create more antidotes for the rest of us to become resistant to its effects." When the doctor nodded, an assistant entered with the necessary ingredients. Menma returned to the room an hour later with 4 syringes of the antidote. He used medical ninjutsu to revive Konkuro after injecting him with the antidote. Konkuro awoke slowly from his coma and blinked blearily as Tamari rushed forward to hug him. After the surgery, Menma sighed, wiped his face with a towel, and drank some water. That much precise chakra control was exhausting. Konkuro's life could have been lost if he had made just one mistake. He listened as Konkuro explained that the person he was up against was Sasori of the Red Sands. This piqued his interest. In terms of poison mastery, Sasori was one of the few known ninjas who could compete with him. They soon prepared to leave, however, with the addition of Lady Chiyo, following the scent provided by Konkuro. Kakashi summoned Pakun, who sniffed a piece of Sasori's face mask before turning and speaking over his shoulder in his surprisingly deep voice, "This way, the scents are faint, but I can still follow it." Team Kakashi and Chiyo nodded before speeding off into the desert. Hopefully, the K's cage will be found alive before the Akatsuki extracts the Ichibi. Several hours after Team Kakashi left Suna, forest clearing. The team and Suna shinobi made good progress through the desert, eventually crossing into the land of rivers, a simple nation dominated by rice farmers. They were running through a forest when the 6 ninja were forced to stop when they saw the 2 black and red-clad Akatsuki members. "Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki," Menma said, narrowing his eyes. "It's been a long time, Menma." "Shio," Itachi said with a slight tilt of his head. Shio frowned as she examined the 2 shinobi before her. Kisame was filled with bloodlust and joy, whereas Itachi's emotions appeared to be suppressed. She assumed that Itachi, too, must have felt guilty about murdering his family, so he buried his feelings. "Be wary of Itachi's eyes. One look into them and you'll be trapped in a genjutsu," Kakashi said, raising the headband that covered his Sharingan eye and looking at his team. Sakura took a small step forward. "Let me fight him, I have the best chances against his genjutsu." Mito took a step forward as well, drawing her broken sword. "I will fight Kisame, the rest of you go ahead," the sword said, despite being broken in half. Mito gave Kakashi a hard stare as he was about to protest. Even a war veteran like Kakashi had to be intimidated by the orb's resolution. "Don't worry, I will survive." Kakashi nodded and sighed. The squad's 4 remaining members dashed around the Akatsuki members, Sakura and Mito covering for them as they passed. The remaining 4 ninjas faced off against each other soon after the 4 members left. Itachi versus Sakura. Itachi took notice of the pink-haired girl in front of him. She wore what appeared to be a purple bondage outfit with a half-length skirt and a cape with a high collar. He'd heard rumors about a genjutsu user without a clan becoming nearly as good as him. He appears to have the opportunity to find out if the rumors are true. Sakura stared fearlessly into Itachi's Sharingan eyes. She was constantly releasing the genjutsu that had been placed on her. "Let us begin the battle then," she smirked as she took out a bottle and threw it at the ground, filling the area with smoke. As the smoke cleared, Itachi looked around. There were several deceivers all around him. He suspected she had used the smoke to conceal some clones. A simple but effective strategy. However, for someone like him, he could easily tell where the genuine one was. He dashed forward and punched a Sakura, but frowned as the clone vanished into smoke, splitting into two separate mirror images. He frowned. She must be replacing herself with clones while creating more with each one he killed. Once again, it was simple and not what he expected. He noticed a clone dash towards him and noticed there was no shadow cast by the clone. He let the clone hit him, knowing it would pass through him. He was taken aback when he felt pain from the punch and struggled to regain his balance in the face of the apparent clone's constant barrage of attacks. He was constantly fending off attacks from the pink-haired Jonin's mirror images. What is this technique? My Sharingan is unable to shatter the illusion. I can tell they're all clones, but they deal serious damage. Furthermore, he stabbed a Sakura with a kunai and frowned deeply when the clone split into two. Every time I kill a clone, it splits into two. Having a little trouble? Sakura smirked at the struggling Uchiha. I learned this technique to counter your brother. He broke my heart, you know, so I am going to break his. I guess I can start by killing his life's goal. He would have sweat dropped if he wasn't Itachi Uchiha. One of his little brother's fangirls appeared to have gone insane. He decided to take it a step further and leapt into the air, blasting the clones below him in a massive fireball. He landed safely and grunted in annoyance when he felt another Sakura clone kick him in the back. He appeared to have just doubled the total number of clones in the clearing. This illusion left a lasting impression on him. Whatever the pink-haired genin was doing, it was exactly what the Sharingan needed. His eyes couldn't break the illusion and were constantly attacked by mimics. He could have used his Mangekyu to break out if he wasn't a clone, but he didn't have enough chakra to sustain the technique. He sighed as he felt a kunai bury itself into the clone's heart. As he melted away, he noticed the former fangirl in front of him and said, "You are very skilled in the arts of illusion. I would like to fight you again someday, at full power." With those words, he melted completely, revealing the face of an unknown Suna Jonin. Sakura frowned and cupped her hands around a bottle. She'd been working on that smoke for years to counteract the Uchiha's gaze. Instead of inserting her chakra into the opponent, she dispersed it in the vial's smoke, creating mirages and other effects on the victim. Itachi had seen many clones of her split when she was hit, but she was only one and he hit the wrong way, seeing what the smoke made him see. Because it wasn't in the body, the Sharingan couldn't counter the illusion. The Sharingan enhanced the illusion by making the clones more visible and distinct to the wielder. It was the ideal deception to counter a Uchiha. She started running in the direction her allies were going, hoping Mito was doing well against Kisame. Kisame versus Mito. The two had jumped away from the illusionist battle and landed in a rocky field near the forest's edge, ideal for practicing their sword skills. Kisame regarded his opponent with wariness. Her purple hair was in a messy bun, and her fringes nearly covered her cheeks. She was dressed in a combination of bandages and plate armor, with leather sandals. Strange garb for a shinobi, but ideal for a swordswoman. He also looked over the girl's sword. The katana was an unusual weapon. It was perfectly straight and symmetrical. On the broken blade, one green signal glowed. It must have been quite lovely when finished. How do you expect to fight me with that broken sword? He smirked at the purple-haired girl. My blade may be broken. Mito dashed forward at great speed, appearing behind the cocky Akatsuki member. Kisame barely had time to lift Samahata up to block her strike before being assaulted by the girl's fast and brutal strikes. She approached opportunities by twirling around and jumping. If Kisame hadn't known better, he'd think it was being attacked by a killer rabbit. He split up and flashed through one-handed hand signs, releasing a large burst of water from his mouth that roared towards the girl like a tidal wave, with Kisame riding on top like a surfer. Mito charged forward, using chakra to boost her leap, clearing the wave and slashing at Kisame as he passed. As the broken blade cut into his shoulder, the shark-like man grunted a little. Ah, you actually managed to cut me. That is impressive, Kisame said, his grin widening. But do you know what happens when a shark smells blood? Mito tightened her grip as she sensed the air becoming saturated with killing intent. They go into a feeding frenzy. Kisame dashed forward at breakneck speed, seemingly teleporting in front of the girl with his Samahata raised. As the large sword swung in random but swift strikes at her guard, the swordswoman barely had time to parry and dodge. Mito realized she needed to get serious if she wanted to survive. She gathered yin chakra around herself and yelled with ferocity, stunning Kisame for a few seconds with the force of the physical energy. The purple-haired woman jumped away, her sword poised in front of her. Green energy appeared to emerge from the blade. She kept pumping energy and concentrating her willpower until she was holding her completed katana. The sword was as long as she was tall and as wide as a katana could be. After graduating as a swordmaster from her father, Hayate, she forged his sword. However, his father died 2 years ago while on a mission against an unknown rogue ninja. She'd broken her sword on his gravestone and vowed to rebuild it once she'd avenged him. With a roar, she swung her sword at Kisame, the force of the swing causing a shockwave of wind to erupt from the blade and slam into the shark man. Mito narrowed her eyes and executed the move that earned her the nickname, Broken Wings. She spun in several graceful arcs, cutting deeply into Kisame, before leaping into the air, flipping and severing the man as she descended. She panted and frowned as she examined her opponent's two halves. Kisame was not the man on the ground. It was an unknown ninja with flecks of ash dissolving around him. She sheathed her broken sword once more and dashed to catch up with her teammates. They needed to save a cage. Akatsuki Foundation. The 4 remaining team members stood in front of the Akatsuki's base, which was a massive boulder with a sealing tag on it. Shio examined the seal. It's a 5-point seal, and normally to remove it, someone would have to remove all of the seal's mimics in the area at the same time, but I know a shortcut. I just have to cut the chakra connects with a counter seal. There, and now just the boulder. She quickly drew a seal around the 5-point seal and applied chakra. Menma took a step forward and rested his hand on the boulder, which was reduced to rubble in a bright flash of light that everyone had to avoid looking at. They dashed inside, only to be horrified as a massive cloud of chakra was absorbed into a statue's mouth and Gaara collapsed to the ground, seemingly dead. Only the eyes of the Akatsuki were colored, and they stood on top of the statue's fingers. The apparent leader of the group looked at them calmly with his purple-ringed eyes, and said in an emotionless tone, "Deidara, Sasori, deal with the annoyances." A hunchback and blonde man, woman? Nodded and jumped down from the fingers, and the remaining 8 Akatsuki members vanished. The blonde woman grunted and looked around the room. HNNN? Which one has the 9 tails? Shio drew her nodochi, and a threatening wind gathered around her. Give Gaara back, you jerks. That's her. According to reports, she uses a nodochi and wind combination, Sasori said for the first time. They have information on all of us, and I assume they know most of our abilities, while we know nothing of theirs, Menma observed. Shio spoke up as they prepared for their fight. Deidara of the explosive palms is someone I know, Blondie. He is a missing S-rank ninja from Iwa. He is famous for transforming clay into explosives with his palms. Everyone nodded, but Deidara summoned a large pelican-like sculpture that ate Gaara's body, and the now confirmed blonde-haired man exited the hideout while calling out, "You have 9 tails if you can catch me." Shio growled and pursued the effeminate man, while Menma turned to Kakashi and said, "Go back her up, Lady Chio, and I will face Sasori." The one-eyed Jonin nodded and pursued his pupil. Menma and Chio vs. Sasori. Menma administered 3 antidote syringes to the elderly veteran. "Take these. The antidote has already been integrated into my immune system. His poison will have no effect on me." Chio nodded and spoke as she tucked the vials into her robes. "That is not his true body. Hiriko is the name of the puppet. He is trapped inside the puppet." Menma nodded and dashed forward at full speed, determined to destroy the puppet. Sasori retaliated by opening the puppet's mouth, revealing a machine gun spewing hundreds of senbon needles. Menma dashed forward, hardening his veins to prevent the senbon from piercing him, crossing his arms over his head and dashed right through the wave, shocking the 2 other ninja in the cavern. Menma barely had time to lean to the side to avoid a scorpion tail from the puppet, but the tail was fast enough to cut his shoulder. Menma pressed his hand on the puppet, and the entire thing imploded, causing a cloud of dust to settle over the battlefield. The dust settled, and an Akatsuki member emerged, removing his black cloak and revealing himself to the 2 ninja. Chio exclaimed when she saw Sasori's surprisingly young face. "Impossible, he hasn't aged a day," Chio said as she examined her grandson. "I guess you guys deserve to face my favorite puppet," Sasori sighed as he unsealed the cloaked figure of the second case cage. Chio was horrified when he saw the puppet. "What have you done, Sasori? You've been responsible for the deaths of 3 Suna cages?" "Oi oi oi. I did not kill the 3rd case cage, my subordinate led Orochimaru to him," Sasori grumbled. "You know about Orochimaru? I will force you to reveal his location," Menma inquired. "You can try," Sasori said, attaching all the chakra strings to the body of the second case cage. It demonstrated how complex the puppet was that a master puppeteer like Sasori would need all 10 of his fingers to control it. One of the most interesting things about human puppets is that they can use the abilities the ninja did in life, in this case. The puppetized body released a massive cloud of iron sand into the air, manipulating it with magnetic waves, the legendary iron sand of the second case cage. This declaration was met with an onslaught of waves and spikes of iron sand. The iron sand was a one-of-a-kind weapon in that it could crush, pierce, and bind its enemies. However, he was familiar with Gaara's sand and used the same strategies to avoid the spikes and large geometric rectangles as he looked for an opening. Sasori didn't find an opening until he had the puppet spread all the iron sand in spikes. He avoided all of the spikes and dashed forward, slamming the puppet with a powerful palm thrust. "It would be pointless to try any of my other human puppets against you," sighed Sasori as he unbuttoned his Akatsuki cloak and threw it off with a flourish, revealing his body to be a human puppet as well. "You went that far? You turned your entire body into a human puppet," Chio exclaimed. The legendary Suna puppeteer appeared resolute as she unsealed a small scroll from her arm. "In that case, I am resolved to use these which I have sworn never to use again," she said, revealing 10 white puppets. All of the puppets were being controlled by one finger, the rumored pinnacle of mastery for a puppeteer. The legendary finger puppets of Chio. "It is rumored that you stormed an entire castle with that technique, but..." Sasori finally showed some interest in the technique. He revealed a cloud of blue energy when he opened the part of his chest where his lungles would be. He waved a scroll behind him, and what appeared to be 100 puppets appeared in the air. He smirked slightly, having planned for something like this. Sasori smirked at the 2 and motioned with his chakra for all the puppets to attack, but none of them moved. When he looked up, he was astounded to see that all of his puppets were tethered to chakra strings. When he looked around the cavern, he was surprised to see hundreds of spiders, each controlling a chakra string to create an interlocking web that caught all of his puppets in the air. When he saw Menma resting his palm on his heart, he knew he was defeated. He knew he was going to die, so in his final moments, he decided to screw over his last teammate. More than the Akatsuki, Orochimaru had betrayed him by stealing the bodies of the first and second Hokage before he could turn them into puppets. You wanted information on Orochimaru, didn't you? He sighed. I'm not sure if you want him or his new lapdog Sasuke, but I had planned to meet a spy in his ranks at the Tenshi Bridge 10 days from now. Do with the information what you will. Menma nodded and released the chakra that had accumulated in his palm, destroying Sasori's heart. Chiyo looked down at her grandson's body, sad. I wish there had been something I could have done to prevent this from happening, but there is one more thing I must do. We need to find the others. Menma nodded and sealed Sasori's body, hoping to learn something from the Akatsuki from the corpse. They both left the cavern, hoping that their teammates had defeated the other Akatsuki member. Shio and Kakashi vs. Deidara. Shio and Kakashi jumped along spikes as Deidara flew overhead through a gorge. Shio used wind attacks repeatedly to try to ground the Akatsuki member, but the clay construct evaded the tactics with ease. Shio, I have a technique that will surely ground him, if not kill him directly. Distract him while I prepare it, Kakashi said. As Kakashi focused chakra into his Sharingan eye, transforming it into the Mangekyu version, the blonde Uzumaki nodded and kept up the pressure. He was surprised 3 years ago that he had the Mangekyu. He tested it after his encounter with Itachi and discovered, to his surprise, that he also possessed the Mangekyu. The chakra drain, however, was so great that he could only keep it active for a few minutes. So he started training hard for 3 years and was now much stronger than before, able to keep the Mangekyu up for around an hour, plenty of time to use this technique. Soon after, a warp hole appeared on Deidara's torso, and he exclaimed in surprise, Oi! What is this hum? The hole continued, but Deidara was able to avoid it at the last second, and it absorbed his shoulder, completely detaching his remaining arm. The blonde grunted and missed a wind cut that sliced through his bird, causing it to fall to the ground. Shio's clone caught the clay bird's head and opened it, revealing Gaara's corpse. The clone was enraged and scattered to inform her creator of the news. Shio was more enraged than she had ever been. She glared at the Akatsuki member, oblivious to the fact that her eyes had turned purple and her irises had become slits. He just became Kazekage and you go and kill him. Finally accepted by everyone and you just take that away. I will kill you. Purple chakra condensed into spheres around her and they all launched at the armless Akatsuki member, creating a massive crater where each orb landed. Kakashi arrived on the scene, his eyes widening at the enraged Shio. Before the mission, he remembered Jiraiya's warning. Flashback. Jiraiya looked Minato and Kakashi in the eyes and said, I inspected the seal and it is true that the Kyuubi has vanished, but it appears that something has taken its place. What replaced the Kyuubi? Minato wondered. I don't know, Jiraiya said, shaking his head, but when I tried to loosen the seal on the chakra so she could access it easier, Shio became much crueler and gained power over these dark orbs. It took everything I had to seal it away again. The Toad Sage handed Kakashi a slip of paper with a seal on it, saying, use this if whatever is in the seal acts up again. Kakashi nodded and examined the paper, hoping he wouldn't have to use it. End of flashback. He dashed forward and pressed the seal against Shio's brow, causing the purple tint in her eyes to fade and her normal blue to return. Shio nodded, indicating that she was fine. When Menma and Chiyo arrived, the Akatsuki member was eating his clay bird. Mito and Sakura quickly followed, encircling Deidara. You will never catch me. yelled the mad bomber to the assembled Konoha ninjas. All of his chakra is gathering in his stomach, he's going to explode, exclaimed Shio. Everyone fled, and Deidara protruded obscenely, exploding in a brilliant fireball. The ninja would have been burned if the fire hadn't been absorbed by Kakashi's wormhole. The silver-haired Jonin appeared exhausted after performing that move twice in one day. Forest thinning. Shio began to cry as they placed Gaara on a bed of flowers. Why is it always Gaara? He just became Cage. Shio. Kakashi said sadly to his pupil. Shio glared vehemently at her sensei, one eye glowing slightly purple. No, sensei. This is not right. What right did they have to seal the Ichibi inside of him? None of this would have happened. Gaara would still be alive. His life would not have been a living hell. Shio looked on sadly as she rested on her knees and a blue glow surrounded her hands as she entered Gaara's fallen body. Shio appeared perplexed. What is she up to? I thought he was gone? Shio appeared exhausted as she said her final words, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. With my grandson, daughter, and this young man. I was responsible for sealing the Shukaku into Gaara. It is our mistakes as elders that have most harmed this generation. It is my responsibility to at least make one thing right. She turned to Shio and Menma, saying, you too. You are a great hope to this war-torn world. You both shine with your own light, bringing hope to even a hopeless old lady like me. Treasure that light. For in the times ahead, we will certainly need it. Lady Chio collapsed with her final words, the rest of the blue chakra entering Gaara, who twitched a bit and slowly opened his eyes. Shio rushed forward to embrace the recently revived Cage, exclaiming, Gaara. You're alive. Shio. You saved me? Gaara was taken aback by the hug. No, Granny Chio did something that brought you back to life, but everyone came to support you. Shio said, shaking her head. Gaara looked around, and almost 100 Suna ninja, from Genin to Jonin, were happily cheering from the sidelines for their safe and sound Cage. Gaara was speechless as they returned to Suna, knowing he had finally earned his village's respect since the Shukaku was sealed inside of him. 2 days later. Before leaving, the Konoha ninja attended Chio's funeral. Gaara himself arrived at the gates to send them off to thank his rescuers. This event would greatly strengthen the bonds between the leaf and sand. The journey concluded with Shio shaking hands with the Cage, a memorable moment that would mark the start of a larger alliance between their two villages. The Konoha ninja waved and started walking back towards Konoha. Each of them was ecstatic that 2 of the Akatsuki had died. Unknown to the Konoha or Suna ninja, a lollipop-masked man was flicking Sasori's ring up and down, giggling to himself as his plan advanced. Except for Kakashi, the entire Rookie 12 and their Jonin senseis stood in the Hokage's office. Minato sat across from them, hands clasped in front of his face. He looked each ninja in the eyes and spoke seriously, everyone here, I am assigning a long-term mission. You will all be a part of a mission to take down the Akatsuki. You will be removed from the active roster to only take part in missions involving the Akatsuki. He paused to look for any doubt in their faces, finding none, he continued, you will each be assorted into your original teams and assigned missions. The unnamed teams nodded and exited the room. Minato examined the 2 teams before removing 2 scrolls, each labeled with an S rank. Team 9, your mission will be to go to the Land of Water and track down the Sanbi. It has been reported that it has been reformed. I do not want to do this, but the only way to ensure that the Sanbi remains safe is to seal it within a Jinchuriki. This information caused everyone in the room to widen their eyes. 2 San. We cannot make another Jinchuriki. Shio exclaimed angrily. "We have no choice," Minato said, closing his eyes and frowning. The Sanbi is a sitting duck, completely exposed to the Akatsuki, and Kiri lacks the sealing experience to properly seal it. All they would do is make another Gaara. Shio winced as she remembered Gaara as a psychopathic boy before she and Menma helped him. This seal is a weakened version of Shio's seal. It will be able to seal the Sanbi in an appropriate container. We have prepared an urn that will be used to seal the Sanbi. Minato sighed again and handed Anko a piece of paper. Nobody in the room was happy, but they knew it was necessary. Team 7, my mission for you is to hunt down the spy in Orochimaru's ranks that Sasori mentioned, and since Kakashi is still out of commission, I have requested a third teammate and sensei for you, Minato said. The rest of you will remain on standby until anything else comes up, he said to the rest of the teams. Be prepared at a moment's notice. Everyone nodded and resumed their duties. Village entrances, Team 9. Anko smiled at her 3 students. It's been a long time since we've worked together. I'm looking forward to it. Yosh. Despite the severity of the mission, it will also be a chance to reconnect among friends. Lee grinned. Yakumo and Menma smiled as they started running through the forest toward the land of water. Other parties besides the Akatsuki were interested in the Sanbi, which they were unaware of. Lake Unknown, Land of Water. After a week of travel, the 4 members of Team 9 arrived on the shore of the mist-covered lake. Anko noticed the mist and said aloud, "The mist is laced with chakra. It is too dense for human chakra, so the Sanbi must be producing it. It has been reported that the 3 Tails is capable of producing illusions through the use of water, so be cautious." Menma closed his eyes and extended his chakra web around the lake, feeling the Sanbi's presence. It took the shape of a massive 3-tailed turtle at the lake's bottom. It appeared to be dozing off. He opened his eyes and turned to face his team, saying, "The Biju is at the bottom of the lake. To seal it, we need to get it to the surface. To get the Sanbi to rise, we'd need a large disturbance in the lake," Anko grumbled. Before anyone could react, a voice from behind them said, "That won't be necessary because we'll be the ones to seal the Biju." 6 illegal sound ninja were glaring at the 4 Konoha ninja. A woman with purple hair and a fur-collared coat stood at the front of the group. The second individual was a tall and unimpressive man with slicked back brown hair. The third man. Woman. Thing was dressed entirely in slime, with only his face exposed. The fourth man was extremely short, with white hair and gray skin. The final man wore a gas mask over his mouth and had white hair. Anko returned the sound ninja's stare. "You are an illegal sound ninja, we will have to bring you in." The group's apparent leader smirked and said, "You can try, but you won't succeed." The woman turned to her team and said, "Take care of them, I'll bring Yakamura to seal the Sanbi." The 4 subordinates nodded and separated, each focusing on Konoha Shinobi while the leader made her way across the lake with a young boy. Anko versus Renji. Anko smirked as she approached Renji. What her opponent didn't realize was that snakes were already burrowing underground to wrap around him. All she had to do was wait for them to bind him and then kill him with one hand. However, Renji jumped away just as the snakes emerged from the ground. Anko's eyes narrowed as she began to hurl shurikens and kunai at the poncho-clad man. That many snakes without warning should have been impossible to avoid. He must be a sensor or have other means of sensing what is not visible. She looked around the field and noticed a bat screeching in one of the trees out of the corner of her eye. Because it was daytime, the chances of a bat being in one of the trees were almost nil. She smirked and mentally told the snakes she'd left in the woods to eat. Renji locked his gaze on the purple-haired Jonin. He remembered her as Orochimaru's favorite student. so killing her would give him a good chance of succeeding Kabuto. When he heard his bat's echolocation revealing the location of everything around him, he smirked a little. He was about to use echolocation to fool the Jonin when he paused and spat blood. When he looked down, he noticed a kunai protruding from his heart. He looked up at the snake mistress's smirking face as she dissolved into snakes and appeared behind him. How? He managed to say. You shouldn't leave your bats out in the open. All it took was a simple genjutsu to replicate the sound of bats while my snakes killed all the real bats. You relied so much on your bats that you left yourself open. Now die, Anko said as she sliced off the man's head with her kunai. Lee vs. Kiho. Lee turned to face the small man, grinning widely. Let us have a youthful battle, sound nin. As he observed his opponent, Kiho muttered under his breath, what the hell is with this guy? He was about to raise his arm to fire his wrist launcher when he was knocked away by a fierce kick from Lee. What the hell is that kid made of? His attacks hurt more than my missiles, the gray-skinned man said as he flew back several feet before flipping to his feet, panting heavily from the kick. He grunted as he was kicked away again, but this time he fired his rocket at the green-clad ninja in midair. As the rocket streaked towards Lee's face, time seemed to slow down. However, just as the rocket was about to collide with his fact, Lee vanished and reappeared beneath the small man, kicking him into the air. Lee vanished and seemed to vanish as Kiho was battered in various directions before being drop-kicked back to the ground, breaking the ground beneath the white-haired rocket user and killing him instantly. Lee sighed as he stared at his opponent's corpse. He despised killing, but he had no choice against a sound ninja. Every ninja who wore that headband was given a kill on sight order by every country. He then began to follow the group's leader, hoping to stop her before she sealed the Sanbi. Gozu vs. Yakumo. Gozu glared at the bandana-wearing girl in front of him. She didn't look like much with her simple appearance, but he knew he shouldn't judge a shinobi by their appearance. He made the decision to end this quickly. He fortified his body with earth techniques and dashed forward at breakneck speed, punching a hole in the girl's body. He shook his fist and began to walk away, only to pause when he felt an inch on his arm. He looked down and noticed a small bump on it. He frowned and scratched it, only to find several more bumps on his arm. He became concerned as lumps appeared all over his body and he felt bites beneath his skin. Soon, some of the lumps burst, and small spiders crawled out, devouring him. This went on until his mind succumbed to the trauma. The scene then disintegrated into black sakura petals, revealing Yakumo standing above the foaming Gozan's mouth. She stabbed the man in the chest with a knife. Ibiki had taught her a lot. He had taught her to always begin with the most traumatizing genjutsu before the enemy realized she was a genjutsu expert. They'll assume she's using ninjutsu and won't try to counter genjutsu. Their own brains would turn against them and sink them in terror, removing all logical thought before they could realize their error. She began to pursue their group's leader, knowing she had to stop her before she sealed the Sanbi. Menma vs. Nurari and Kagiri. Menma sighed as he looked at the two ninja in front of him, irritated that Orochimaru would send such low-level ninja to fight him. He looked at the two and said casually, I'll make this quick. As the leaf shinobi in front of them began to drip poison, each drop created sizable holes that ate the earth. Both of the sound shinobi glared but widened their eyes. Menma dashed forward after being completely covered in poison, muttering under his breath, Doku no Yoroi. Nurari attempted to hit him, likely thinking his suit would protect him from the poison, but he was mistaken as he cried out in pain. As the poison infected him, his suit began to turn purple. That poison is composed of my most lethal venoms in my blood, and it will slowly infect your blood until your entire body shuts down, Menma smirked. He sniffed the air and looked disapprovingly at the other sound ninja. Poison? Do you think poison will affect me? Kagiri stiffened and moved away, but Menma had had enough of him. He vanished, palm thrusting the man into oblivion. He sighed and turned off his poison armor. He was about to continue on to their leader when he noticed a pillar of chakra in the air and cursed. It appears they had already begun their Biju awakening. In the middle of the lake, Yakamura screamed as he released all of his chakra to awaken the beast and deplete his chakra reserves to make room for the Biju chakra. As the Sanbi awoke from its slumber, the lake became choppy. When Gurren turned around and saw all four of the enemy Konoha shinobi, she smirked but frowned. "I thought those dimwits would have given us more time," she grumbled. "Surrender or die," Anko said. "You are a legal soundnin under the employment of an S-class criminal." Gurren snarled at the insult to her master and formed two crystal-bladed tonfas on her arms, saying, "Never. You'll have to kill me first." "Then we just have to kill you," Anko smirked. When the four Konoha ninja were about to fight, they were engulfed in crystal. "Ha! Kill me? What a laugh. I can just crystallize the water and kill you instantly," smirked Gurren. Menma, on the other hand, quickly broke through the crystal and observed his teammates, saying, Your crystal is strong, but I can send my chakra out in waves, disrupting their molecules and destroying it." Gurren frowned but smirked slowly. "It doesn't matter. I can still kill you here, and the crystal surrounding your teammates won't be released unless I die." Menma took a stance and said, "Then I will not hold back." Gurren dashed towards him, her crystal-bladed tonfas in hand. Menma activated one of his new jutsu, Webbed Arena. Chakra strings flared around him and began to expand off his tenketsu points, connecting everywhere on the lake, forming a large interconnected web around the two combatants. "These strings are just chakra, how can they do anything?" Gurren wondered. She cut one with one of her blades and was surprised when the blade became stuck to the chakra and was unable to move. "This is one of my best techniques. I can use chakra strings to create an arena around an area, giving it special effects. In this case, each string is highly condensed, and only I am allowed to pass through them," Menma smirked. Gurren growled and dismissed her tonfas, saying she'd have to defeat him at long range. She flashed through some hand seals and spoke loudly, "In that case, take this." Jade Crystal Dragon. A large Japanese-styled dragon erupted from the lake and broke through several strands of chakra. However, the dragon was much slower than usual, and Menma easily avoided it. He decided to take it a step further and released a shadow clone in the forest, activating Sage Mode Level 1. His back sprouted four-bladed spider legs, and his eyes turned red with slits. Gurren took a step back after seeing this form. Seeing it so suddenly looked terrifying. Menma smirked and jumped, his four spider legs attaching to the web as he moved quickly in the air, his cheeks bulging as he thought, neurotoxic shots. He spat shots of purple poison at the dodging woman. Gurren growled as she dodged the poison in a small space. She had already formed a crystal shield, but the poison seemed to eat right through it. She saw another coming from the senjutsu user and dodged as it barely touched her shoulder. She winced as she felt the acid on her shoulder and rushed to the lake to wash it away. Unfortunately, this gave Menma an opportunity to leap from his web and pierce both of her shoulders with his spider-like appendages. Gurren screamed silently as poison from the appendages coursed through her veins. As her vision faded, she was saddened that she would no longer be useful to Orochimaru and that Yakamura would almost certainly die at the hands of the Konoha ninja. Menma sighed as he extracted the female's appendages. It saddened him that he had to put an end to the last crystal user's life. He sighed as he looked at the boy Gurren had brought with her. What would he do with the child now? The boy was shocked by the corpse of his mother figure and began to hyperventilate, releasing all of his chakra as he did so. Menma staggered back from the force of the chakra and almost collided with his uncrystallized teammates. As the massive figure of the Sanbi rose from the depths, the entire lake became stormy. Quickly, the urn. We must use this opportunity to seal the Biju, Anko said to Menma. Menma nodded and unsealed the urn, only to be surprised when a massive wave crashed down on them, forcing them all to dodge. The Biju appeared to be enraged as a result of the child's chakra, causing the lake to become extremely choppy. The water tossed him around and he gasped as he let go of the large urn, which crashed to the rocks, broken to pieces. Damn it. What do we do now? Yelled Yakumo above the rain. Lee looked around at his three teammates before saying, "Seal it in me." Are you crazy? We have no idea what sealing a Biju into you could do. You could explode. Menma exclaimed to his teammate. Or it can be contained in me, Lee said solemnly, because I have no chakra in my coils, only my core, and the Biju chakra will be able to rest easily into me. Anko looked critically at her former genin and sighed, "Alright, we have no other choice." She took out the seal and turned to her other genin. "You will need to keep my safe during the sealing. Anything could happen if it is disrupted." Menma and Yakumo nodded and approached the Sanbi. Menma performed hand seals, and the blue chakra strings that remained around the lake began to expand and weave around the three tails. Yakumo went through some hand seals and cloned them all over the lake, hoping to distract the Sanbi if it escaped from the web. Anko had already transferred the seal from the paper to Lee's stomach and was quickly completing the required 100 hand seals, taking care not to miss any. Menma was sweating profusely as he struggled to maintain his balance in the turbulent water while also tying the strings that held the Sanbi in place. He had a lot of chakra reserves, but this was draining them quickly. He winced as one of the beast's tails slammed into one of the illusions Yakumo had placed around the lake. He quickly released more chakra strings to keep the tail at bay. Yakumo was panting heavily as she pounced on the Sanbi with calming illusions and replicas of their team after another. Anko flashed through the final 5 hand seals and exclaimed, 8 trigrams divine seal. As a blue dome encircled nearly the entire lake. The Sanbi roared again before breaking apart in the dome and entering Lee's stomach, who was shaking in pain on the small boat that Gurren had brought with her. Lee began to breathe more easily after nearly 10 minutes of holding his breaths. Menma rushed over to the downed Chunin and placed a glowing green palm over his stomach. Menma closed his eyes as he saw all of the Chunin scroll's problems pass through his closed eyelids. His chakra coils have been repaired, he exclaimed. Anko, who was panting from the ceiling, exclaimed, "What?" Lee's disease was that he could never expand his chakra coils, practically having coils of a newborn while his core continued to expand, but with the influx of Biju chakra traveling his veins to the seal, it forced them all open and his chakra is now circulating his body evenly, and he will now be able to use jutsu, Menma exclaimed to his teammates. Lee definitely deserves this, Yakumo said cheerfully. Anko sat Lee on her back and turned to her genin, saying, "All right, let's get back and report to the Hokage before any Akatsuki members show up." Everyone nodded and vanished in a flash of light. Konoha. 1 week later, 1 week later. As he read the report, Minato rubbed his tired brow. He only asked for one mission. For his former son's team, there was one mission where everything didn't go to hell. He looked at Lee, who appeared to be in good health despite having a Biju sealed into him. He had read the report about the broken urn. So they had sealed the Biju into the green-clad genin, curing him. You will all be paid the appropriate amount for the S-ranked mission. Lee, for your sacrifice, you will also earn the pay of another S-rank mission. I do not want the information that Lee is now a Jinchuriki getting out. Lee, you may tell Guy, but no one else. I think he will be thrilled that you can now use chakra. Lee smiled broadly and nodded. It felt strange knowing there was another being inside of him, but he refused to let it stop him from living his life. With the power of youth, he would live it to the fullest. When the other team that I sent to gather information from Orochimaru returns, I will brief you again, Minato said to the team. Take this time to rest. You have earned it. Everyone nodded and exited the office, pleased that they had denied the Akatsuki one of the Biju. Lake Land of Water. A blond man in a black cloak landed his bird on the beach and turned to his partner, saying, "It isn't here, But senpai. All the reports said it was here," yelled a lollipop-masked man. "I know Toby. Someone must have taken it before us, Deidara said, frowning. "Who could have taken it before us?" exclaimed Toby, who had changed his name. "I don't know, but I'm guessing it was either Orochimaru or those leaf brats who cut off my arms, growled the feminine blonde. Toby put his arm over his eyehole and sobbed, "Wah. We were so close. I wanted to make Leader Sama proud. How the hell did he get accepted into the Akatsuki again, Deidara deadpanned at his partner. Toby, unbeknownst to the blonde, had activated his Mangekyo Sharingan behind his arm and was looking around the lake. I feel chakra from those leaf shinobi here. The three tails must have been sealed. For the time being, I'll have Zetsu observe them and look for the Sanbi's Jinchuriki." Deidara sculpted two large birds out of clay and turned to Toby, saying, "Come on, we have to report this to Leader Sama." "Yes, senpai," said Toby. They took off to inform the Akatsuki's leader of the new development. Shio and Mito were walking down the path to the village gates, talking about their latest mission. Shio clenched her fist and said, "I can't wait to find this Orochimaru informant and get all the information we can from him. That snake needs to pay for everything he's done. Yes, I hope our new teammates are capable fighters. I don't want our new members to be weak," Mito said. Shio nodded and said, "Yes, I hope so, and by the way." Shio drew her sword and dispatched the two ink beasts who attempted to ambush her, and Mito vanished in an instant. She swung her sword in graceful arcs and cut down the other ink drawings before turning to face the unknown assailant on the rooftop. The adversary was pale, with black short hair and dressed in an unusual shinobi outfit. Before being startled when Mito appeared behind him, her broken blade inches from his neck, the boy seemed somewhat surprised that his creations had been so easily defeated. Shio vanished from her location and reappeared in front of the pale boy. "Who are you, and why did you attack us?" she demanded. "I wanted to test my new teammates, and I must say it is clear that you both have very large penises," the unknown ninja said with a clearly fake smile. When one can face plant on the ground while not moving, it is clear that laws of physics do not exist in fiction. Shio developed a large tick mark on her brow and punched the punk in the face. Hard. A few moments later, as Yamato of the Mokuton saw his first team, he rubbed his brow. The original members of Team 7 were both angry, while Sai smiled his fake smile, despite having a large black eye on his face. He looked at Mito and knew that if he asked her, "Explain," he would get an honest answer. "He accused us of having big dicks," Mito replied, her face solemn and serious. Yamato gave the girl a deadpan. How could she say something so heinous so casually? He sighed as he noticed no argument on Sai's face. He rubbed his face with his palm and said, "We are now a team, and as a team, we do not torment or hit each other." Shio remained obstinate despite Mito and Sai's nods. He decided to put on the face to put a stop to this, and Shio blanched as her new team leader's face turned scary and a flashlight appeared out of nowhere. Yamato turned to face his team and asked, "Understand?" Yamato nodded satisfiedly in the face of the face, and said to his teammates, "Now, let us head out, we can discuss our combat styles and personalities on the way to build up teamwork." The three new teammates nodded and jumped into the nearby forest. Bridge of Tenchi. Team Yamato hid in the brush, watching over the bridge. They had traveled a long distance from Konoha over the previous week. They had stopped briefly by the side of the road to get to know each other better. They had also discovered that their new team captain had the bloodline limit for wood release. Shio and Mito were surprised to learn that the ordinary-looking man possessed one of the most powerful nature manipulation abilities in existence. They eventually arrived at their destination, overlooking the bridge where Sasori was to meet his contact. Yamato had pre-programmed Sasori to extract information from the contact. Shio watched the meeting from a hilltop while keeping an eye on her teammate, whose emotions were perplexing her. He had always felt calm and emotionless, but now it appears that he was anticipating something. But how could he be anticipating something when the informant had already revealed himself to be Kabuto? She widened her eyes as Orochimaru appeared next to Kabuto on the bridge. When Yamato gave the signal, all three of them appeared on the bridge. Shio became enraged when he saw the man who had destroyed so many lives and corrupted Sasuke. Her eyes began to glow purple as her rage grew, unbeknownst to her at the time. Orochimaru smirked at Shio and Mito, knowing they were Sasuke's former teammates. "Ah, there you are, Kukuku. It's so nice to see so many old friends. Are you going to greet me, Shio?" said the snake. Shio clenched her teeth to keep from retorting. She needed to keep her cool in front of the snake Sanin. His next words, however, blew those thoughts out of the water. "I guess Sasuke has surpassed you by now. He never seems to mention you or Konoha. It appears he has forgotten you all entirely." Shio's rage erupted when she heard the slimy snake's name, which had been building up inside her. She had never hated anyone more than she did at that precise moment. She was about to retort when her rage flared and everything went dark for a split second. From the seal. Shio opened her eyes to see the location she had previously visited on her training trip with Jiraiya, the Kyuubi seal. Or, at the very least, the seal for the Kyuubi's chakra. Neither she nor Jiraiya knew where the Kyuubi's consciousness had vanished. She frowned as she noticed the whirling mass of energy had vanished, leaving behind an almost exact replica of herself. Shio, on the other hand, had bone-white hair, extremely pale skin, and glowing purple eyes. The doppelganger was also dressed in a dark purple version of her own plaited gown. She approached cautiously and inquired of her impersonator, "Who or what are you?" "I do not have a name, but I am the better half of you, the embodiment of all of your dark emotions you have neglected for so long," her mirror image smirked. Shio became perplexed. "Neglected? What do you mean? You have never been very angry or mean to other people. The only time you truly felt dark emotions was when you finally realized our dear brother had been abandoned and was facing the snake Pito outside at the time. Those emotions helped me manifest myself long enough to enter the Kyuubi's chakra, basking in the dark emotions embroiling within it. It took a while, but I finally absorbed all the energy into myself, creating this body," the being explained. Shio frowned. "So what does this mean for me? I'm glad you have your own body and everything, but you were inside my mindscape. Isn't it obvious? We fight for control of this body, and trust me, I have more power than you can even imagine. You can't win. Why do we have to fight? Can't we create a different body for you?" Shio became concerned. "No, it is impossible. Despite your neglect of me for so long, I am still a part of you. If we were to separate, you would lose every emotion that is remotely dark. Anger, greed, pride, and even love. How is love a dark emotion?" Shio asked. "Love is spawned from lust, so to love you must host many dark emotions to feel it. You would need to feel pleasure, lust, envy, and possessiveness to feel love, which you would not be able to do if we separated. No, it has to be this way. Only one can control this body, and I assure you, it will be me. But, as I said, for now, I will just entertain myself by killing the wretched snake outside of this body. Shio attempted to leave her mindscape, but her eyes widened when she couldn't. I will let you see what is happening in the real world, trust me, it will be a treat, she said to her dark half, who was still smirking at her. Away from the seal. Shio's hair was covering her eyes, and her shoulders were trembling. What's wrong? Feeling sad that your precious friend has forgotten and surpassed you? Orochimaru smirked, thinking he had broken the girl. Shio continued to shake and laugh, surprising everyone on the bridge because her voice was evil and echoing, ha 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 ha. What a riot. You actually think I care what happens to that duck-assed loser? Shio lifted her head and revealed her purple glowing eyes. Her hair appeared to be becoming paler as it transitioned from a sunny yellow to bone white. Orochimaru frowned and stopped smirking as he observed the girl. This was not what he had anticipated. He had expected the girl to enter the initial Jinchuriki state, allowing him to reapply the five-pronged seal. He licked his lips as he looked at the girl, wanting to see how this was possible on her. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time to waste. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, but I think I'll just kill you all now, he said. Oh, I doubt you'll be able to, Shio smirked evilly. Yamato looked at his subordinate, perplexed as to why she was acting so strangely. Shio, what's wrong, you're not acting like yourself. Shio returned her sensei's gaze before smirking, sorry captain, Shio is not here at the moment. You can call me Yami. She then ignored the Mokuton user's questioning look as three dark orbs appeared around her. This was her fighting style after years of training inside the seal. She gathered spheres of the corrosive chakra of the Kyuubi and used them for both offense and defense. The tainted chakra would infect the body with just one touch from these orbs. She made a motion with her arms, and the three orbs attacked the snake Sannin at the speed of a bullet. Orochimaru easily avoided the three orbs and was about to make a snide remark to the girl when the orbs returning to the possessed Shio's side blasted through his chest. Orochimaru's body twitched, and a healed Orochimaru emerged from the mouth of his old body. A disgusting tactic, fitting for such vermin as you, Yami smirked, forming two more orbs around her body and speaking menacingly, regenerate from this snake. Orochimaru realized he was in a pickle. Whatever happened to the girl in front of him had significantly increased her power. He was forced to flee. He began to flee as Shio floated into the air to pursue him. You will not escape my grasp. Yamato used his Mokuton to try to stop her, but she was too fast and chased after the fleeing Sannin. Forest. Orochimaru smirked as he ran through the forest, confident that he would be able to flee easily thanks to the cover of the trees. Or so he thought until orbs started raining down on him, crushing trees and flora as they pursued him. He cursed aloud as he dodged an orb aimed at his head. In the sky. Yami smirked as she watched the worm try to avoid her orbs. She was quickly becoming bored with this, and Shio could see her gradually regaining control of their body. She went all out, summoning hundreds of dark orbs around her and sending them crashing into the forest in the form of a dark rain. Bridge of Tenchi. Team Yamato members gaped as they saw the orbs fall on the trees, decimating the forest and leaving a large crater in the ground. Yamato had no choice but to use his wood release to secure the bridge and keep it from collapsing. Above the trees. And now for the finale. Yami smirked, cupping her palms together as if in prayer, slowly separating them to form a large orb the size of a large building. She felt the strain of the technique and knew she'd have to rest for a while for this stunt. She wasn't used to her powers yet and overdid it, wasting a lot of chakra. She let go of the orb, which slammed into the ground with the force of a meteor, destroying the surrounding forest, the bridge, and leaving a large crater in the ground. Yami smirked as she slowly drifted down to the bottom of the crater, believing she had finally put an end to the snake. A head erupted from the dirt, however, and shot a sword at her. She quickly formed a black shield in front of herself and was pushed away from the crater, landing next to her light-side teammates. She groaned in agony as the head retreated, clearly returning to its body to flee. 6 wooden totems sprouted from the ground around her and began suppressing her chakra, causing her to frown. She sighed and relinquished control of Shio, having had her fun. She could now delegate the rest of the work to her weaker half. After an hour, Shio awoke quickly and sat up, hoping the events in her mindscape had been a dream. However, as she sensed her teammates' emotions, she knew it wasn't the case. They were terrified of her. When she realized Sai wasn't among them, she frowned. She knew he didn't get hit by any of the attacks because she saw him through her Yami's eyes, so where was he? She sat up slowly and asked her teammates, who were watching her closely, "Where is Sai? Wasn't he hurt?" "No, it's worse. Sai has defected to the enemy. I have a wood clone following them, but we have more pressing issues at the moment." "What happened back there?" Yamato asked. Shio sighed and began to explain, "It appears that the dark half of my emotions, which I have been unintentionally neglecting all this time, took refuge inside the Kyuubi's chakra and absorbed it, gaining her own consciousness and powers. She appears to want control of my body." Yamato and Mito both gave her pitying looks, and Mito rubbed her back, saying, "Don't worry, Hokage-sama or Jiraiya-sama will know what to do." "Yes, I have no doubt Hokage-sama will be able to help," Yamato said, "but for now, we need to focus on the mission. To retrieve information on the Akatsuki and find the traitors Sasuke and Sai." Mito and Shio both nodded, determined to finish the mission. "Yes, Taicho." Entrance to Orochimaru's hideout. Shio, Mito, and Yamato crouched outside one of Orochimaru's hidden entrances. Shio closed her eyes and made a hand sign with her hands. She was completely focused on sensing the people inside the base. There aren't many people in the hideout, just Orochimaru, Kabuto, Sai, and Sasuke. It appears this is an unused hideout. She opened her eyes and looked at her teammates. "That's good, we can sneak in much easier. We'll split into 2 teams. One will break into Orochimaru's office and steal all the information you can, while the other will go after Sai and Sasuke. I'll go after the information, while you 2 go after the traitors." Mito and Shio both nodded. Yamato pressed his hands to the ground and carved a square entrance into the hideout, and the 3 remaining Team Yamato members split up once inside. Yamato merged into the wall's wood, effectively becoming undetectable, and moved through the walls, looking for Orochimaru's office. He passed through the walls and into Orochimaru's room. He approached the desk and instead of opening the drawers, he sunk his hand into the wood and sealed all of the documents because he didn't want to risk tripping over any traps by opening the handles. He opened the folder that Sai had given to Orochimaru, and his eyes widened as he saw all of the Black Ops Anbu members' information. It appears that his suspicions about Danzo assisting Sai's betrayal were correct. Without the Elder's direct assistance, Danzo's prodigy would not be able to access this type of information. He sealed the folder and all the other documents inside a pre-made storage scroll and searched the office for anything else important. He noticed a large container filled with preservation fluid, as well as a severed hand with a ring on the middle finger. He carefully examined the ring and noticed that it matched the reports from Sasori that the puppeteer also wore a ring. He sealed the hand and was about to meet his team when he heard a large explosion in the distance and rushed to help them. Shio and Mito. Shio led the way through the corridors, sensing Sai's location in the basement. They decided to go after Sai first, then Sasuke. When they got to his room, they nodded to each other and kicked the door down. Sai, who was currently resting while waiting for Orochimaru's next orders, was startled when his door was kicked in and the 2 teammates he betrayed entered. Shio and Mito both cracked their knuckles as they stared at the traitor who had irritated them on the way here. after 5 minutes. The Sai was tied up and dragged behind the 2 Konoha ninja, with a black eye and a few more bruises. Sai pondered his options. His orders from Danzo were to infiltrate Orochimaru's lair and kill Sasuke while stealing his eyes. But now it appears he has been apprehended and will most likely be tried for treason upon their return. He'd met Sasuke earlier and realized this was a suicide mission. Sasuke's power exceeded that of his master. He had accepted this and was preparing to make a good effort when his former teammates apprehended him. He knew that if he played his cards correctly, he might be able to escape alive. He looked at Shio and decided to persuade his captor, saying, "I met Sasuke earlier." Shio and Mito both widened their eyes and looked at the traitor. "Then tell us everything you know about him. Anything will help when we eventually find him." Mito hoisted the pale teenager up. Sai nodded and started explaining. Flashback. Sai was walking alongside Kabuto and Orochimaru when they came to a halt outside of a room. "Sasuke-kun, we have a guest," Kabuto said as he opened the door to a shadowy figure. "So this is Sasuke," Sai twitched at the name. "I can't see him clearly, but I sense his strength. He outperforms me and possibly Lord Danzo." "Who is he?" the figure asked, opening his eyes to reveal glowing green irises and 3 black tomo spinning in a circle. "His name is Sai. He hails from Konoha just like you did. He was even on the same team as your former teammates. Maybe you two could catch up some time, discuss the past," Kabuto said, smiling. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and fixed his gaze on the Konoha traitor. As he looked into Sasuke's eyes, Sai felt as if he were being pierced with many spears. When Orochimaru saw this, he stepped forward and said, "Now Sasuke, do not kill him." He was very helpful in providing information about Konoha. Sai dropped to the ground, and Sasuke closed his eyes. Kabuto frowned at Lord Orochimaru's disrespect, but followed the snake Sannin and Konoha traitor out of the room. Flashback concludes. Shio frowned. Sasuke's Sharingan had been red for as long as she had known him, except for the battle in the Valley of the End, and it appeared his eyes had remained green. From what Sai informed them, it appeared his genjutsu ability had also dramatically increased. Previously, Sasuke never used genjutsu because his brother specialized in it, but now it seemed he would do anything for an advantage. "Shio sensed him in the same room you mentioned, so we will meet him for ourselves soon," Mito said again. Sasuke's quarters. Shio and Mito nodded before kicking the door down, and when they didn't see anyone in the room, they both paused, confused, but Shio gasped as she sensed Sasuke on the room's roof before it exploded. Shio drew her sword quickly and swung it in an arc around them, creating a wind barrier that reflected any stray rocks or boulders that would crush them. Shio and Mito opened their eyes to see that the entire roof had collapsed around them and Sasuke was standing above them. Their former teammate had grown his bangs more and they now framed his face with the back of his hair still sticking out. He wore a skin-tight black shirt covered by metal chest armor. He wore metal plates over his shinobi-styled pants and also wore metal plates over his shinobi-styled pants. Shio gave him a look and muttered, "Sasuke." Sasuke looked down at his 2 former teammates and said aloud, "Shio. Mito. I hope you've grown since our time in Konoha." Mito growled and vanished, reappearing behind the traitorous Uchiha. "Why don't I show you how far we've come?" Mito said. She swung her sword at his neck, but the Uchiha intercepted it with a glowing green hand and kicked the girl away, just in time to block Shio's sword thrust, and green lightning sparked from his hands, forming 2 short spears in his hands. The 3 fighters displayed the pinnacle of grace as they flowed from one move to the next, deflecting, parrying, thrusting, and swinging their weapons at each other almost too fast for the observer to see. Even with his improved Sharingan, Sasuke was finding it difficult to read their movements, proving the 2 girls' skill with the sword. Mito growled as one of the strange glowing spears deflected her thrust, and she decided to step it up, and a green glow appeared around her, and she shouted in rage as her sword rebuilt itself, and she attacked Sasuke with much more ferocity and power. Shio narrowed her eyes as her swing was deflected and decided to step up her attacks. Her sword glowed blue as 4 chakra swords surrounded her Nodochi and gathered wind chakra around it, sharpening it. When he saw both attacks, Sasuke frowned and extended his spears to full strength, summoning many more around himself and mentally controlling them as he deflected the much stronger attacks from his 2 former teammates. The Uchiha had to constantly dodge Mito's almost rabbit-like attacks while blocking Mito's heavy swings. Soon, all 3 fighters were locked in a 3-way block as Sasuke tried to force his 2 spears against his 2 teammates' crossed blades. Soon, the combined force of Mito and Shio pushed Sasuke back and he was thrown away a distance before righting himself and landing on the ground. He frowned at the 2 and decided to change tactics. He adjusted his grip on his spears and threw them both after the other. Shio held her sword in both hands and pointed it behind her, yelling a war cry as she swung her sword like a bat, creating a huge wall of wind that blocked each light spear, and the raining spears created a large light show as each miniature spear exploded. Sasuke summoned a 2-sided spear and charged back into the fray, swinging it around at the 2 swordswomen like a bow staff. Before the fight could continue, however, wood tendrils shot from the ground and attempted to bind the Uchiha. Sasuke jumped away just in time, having sensed the chakra due to his Sharingan. He observed his new opponent and idly wondered what happened to Kakashi. He sighed and decided to use one of his strongest moves to end this quickly, as he did not want to fight his former teammates. He tightened his grip on his spear, and it began to glow dark green before his mentor, Orochimaru, grabbed his arm. Shio glared at the snake Sannin and the gray-haired medic, and Orochimaru smirked and said, "Now Sasuke, do not kill them. They might come in handy in the future." "What use could they be?" scowled Sasuke at Orochimaru. "Even if it is only one member, they have managed to take down an Akatsuki member," Kabuto said as he adjusted his glasses. "You will have a better chance of getting your revenge on your brother if you keep them alive." Sasuke's glare softened as he acknowledged the medic's point, and he said apathetically to his former team as they prepared to shunshin later. They all vanished into the wind. Shio sighs and turns to her teammates. "I do not sense them anymore, they got away." "At least we got what we came for," Yamato sighed. "I was able to locate all of Orochimaru's documents on the Akatsuki and his other bases." Mito nodded and turned to face Sai, who was still imprisoned. "We also managed to catch the traitor, Sai," Mito said. "Yes," Yamato said, "but I believe I've discovered a deeper plot behind his betrayal." Sai kept his face blank at these words, but he couldn't help but tense up as he realized Danzo wasn't as well hidden as he thought. "Then let us return to Konoha and report our findings," Mito said, nodding. Konoha. Minato carefully read the report. It appears that as time passes, more mysteries are created as more are revealed. Team Yamato shifted slightly as their Hokage considered the information he had been given. Minato turned to Shio and said, "This Yami of yours. I'm surprised that an aspect of your personality has gained sentience in this way." "Yes, despite not having control, I can still feel her in my mind, sometimes speaking to me," Shio winced and nodded. "What does she tell you?" Minato's frown deepened. "She doesn't try to persuade you to do something bad, does she?" "She doesn't tell me to do evil things, but she does comment on the people around me sometimes." Shio's sweat dropped. "Such as?" Minato asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, she's currently calling you a blonde-haired pansy man." Shio's sweat drop grew larger. Everyone in the room was sweating, and Shio sighed as Yami's voice appeared in her head, saying, "It's true. He has the appearance of a female." "For the time being, we will not seal up this personality," Yamato sighed. It could aggravate the situation, and she has yet to do anything particularly harmful. Aside from destroying several miles of forest. Shio frowned but agreed. Yami had been useful in the fight against Orochimaru. Minato sighed and took up the file that Sai had given to Orochimaru. This, on the other hand, requires immediate attention. There is no way a Chunin ninja, no matter how skilled, could gain access to this information. Only myself, a few select ninja, and the elders have access to this information. Danzo is the only known elder connected to Sai, and I trust every elite Jonin with this information. Yamato frowned at that name, his suspicions confirmed when he saw the documents. Shio was perplexed. Who is Danzo? Someone I hoped you would never meet, Minato sighed. He is a shinobi elder and one of the most powerful ninja of the Third Shinobi War. In recent years, however, he has become something of a warhawk, constantly pushing for a more militant agenda for Konoha. We had previously suspected him of illegal dealings but lacked concrete evidence. However, with these documents, we may be able to bring him down. It will take some time to prepare a case, so you will all be rewarded with an S-class mission payment and a week off for your efforts. Team Yamato exited the room with a nod. Estate of Uzumaki Namikaze. Shio returned to her room and collapsed on her bed, recalling her encounter with Sasuke. It appeared that the friend she had known since childhood was no longer alive. She saw no love or recognition in those glowing green orbs, only hatred and apathy, and she feared that the next time they met, it would almost certainly be to the death.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.